Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
This week, we're going to take a break from talking about politics and religion because we have talked so much about politics and religion. I guess today would be an exploration of human psychology. We did a broadcast like this years and years ago, and I got lots of feedback on it. And I figured this was fertile ground because there's always plenty of bad decision making in our uncautious and often thick-skulled species. I mean, you and I scan the headlines and we're like, I cannot believe somebody actually tried this. I can't believe someone did this. I can't believe this was attempted. But the results are no surprise. And as we read these stories, we find, fascination, maybe even amusement. Now, I realize that not everybody knows what a Darwin Award is. So before I get into my series of stories, let me give you a quick primer, okay? Back in 1985, a users network called Usenet was a very basic message board. This was a precursor to the internet forums that we have today. Usenet was conceived in 1979. It was introduced publicly in 1980 at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and at Duke University. Now, this was over a decade before the World Wide Web went online. But it operated much like the forums do today. Lots of shared articles, and they would be copied from server to server to server, and they would make the rounds. Well, in 1985, a series of Usenet articles began to circulate in newsgroup discussions, and these were tongue-in-cheek posts which highlighted real stories about actual people who had essentially filtered themselves out of the gene pool by making very, very bad decisions. And the joke was that this was a net benefit for humanity, for the species. The mean intelligence of Homo sapiens would then increase. Now, some would call this sick humor. It's inappropriate. We're talking about people losing their lives. I totally understand. I totally get that. But, I myself cannot help see stories about people doing dumb stuff and paying a price and gleaning from these examples object lessons about wisdom and temperance, and in some cases thinking you should have known better. And I know you felt this way in your own life, right? The criminal robs a homeowner, and the homeowner is there, and he comes out and he's chasing the burglar, and the burglar falls into a manhole. Do I fall into a kind of misty-eyed lament over that loss of life? I will admit that I just don't. If you make a jaw-droppingly stupid choice, as everybody around you is going, don't do this, you might die, and then you do it anyway, and it results in you vacating your mortal meat prison, part of me thinks, what have we lost and what have we gained? Does this make me a bad person? We've all slowed down to gawk at the crash scene. We're all human, and we have to admit that some humans are smarter than others. The Darwin Awards, which were originally shared on Usenet during the 1980s, became a formal website in 1993, and books were written An author named Wendy Northcutt wrote a series of Darwin Awards books that started releasing in the year 2000, declaring this, quote, "The Darwin Awards commemorate individuals who protect our gene pool by making the ultimate sacrifice of their own lives. Darwin Award winners eliminate themselves in an extraordinarily idiotic manner, thereby improving our species' chance of long-term survival." And there are 5 rules to qualify for a Darwin Award. The nominee must be dead or rendered sterile. They must use astoundingly stupid judgment. They must have been capable of sound judgment in the first place. The story must be a vetted and verified case, and the nominee must be the one responsible. So, what do you think? Is this harmless amusement or bad taste? If you feel it is the latter, you are probably a better person than I am. And yet I will continue with the broadcast here. A lot of Darwin Award stories that are popular on the internet are fake. They are funny and they are easily shared, but they simply did not happen. I have done my due diligence. I have checked and cross-referenced the stories you are about to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, the Darwin Awards. As reported in the Los Angeles Times and other news outlets across the country, Michael Anderson Godwin of South Carolina had been convicted of raping and murdering a 24-year-old woman. He went to court, was found guilty, and sentenced to death in the electric chair. Now, in this country, when you are convicted and given a death sentence, an automatic appeals process kicks in, and that's what happened with Michael Godwin. And on appeal, his sentence was reduced from death in the chair to life in prison without parole. And yet, for this man, life would not be as long as he might have expected. 6 years after he began his sentence, Michael Godwin was there in his cell, and he was trying to fix a pair of headphones that he was using to hear the sound coming out of his television. Now, this was years ago, so it was a hard line. It was a hard cable. I don't even know if they would have allowed wireless in prison anyway, but the TV was plugged in. Godwin was sitting there with the cable, the headphone cable, and he was trying to prepare the wire for splicing. So he put the metal wire in his mouth. At the moment that he did this, he was naked, and he was sitting on the prison toilet, which was made entirely of metal. The electricity came out of the wall into the TV, down the wire, into Michael Godwin, and you might call this strange luck, karma, sweet justice, call it whatever you like. I call it irony that Michael Anderson Godwin would escape the death penalty and yet 6 years later would die on an electric chair. After all, there was a burglar, and he walked into the H&J store in Orlando, Florida. He was going to rob the place. He stepped through the door, pulled out his .22 target pistol, pointed it around, fired off some warning shots, and shouted at the clerk and the customers, "This is a holdup," or something like that, right? "Give me your money, give me your stuff, put the merchandise in the bag. I am robbing you." But his plan did not go according to plan, and not just because there was a uniformed police officer on his coffee break who happened to be standing right there near the door at the counter when this guy walked in with the intent to commit burglary. He should have expected the cop, by the way, because in order to get inside the store, he had had to walk around the parked police car. No, he would not be deterred. So this burglar continued with his plan. He should have been a bit more reflective about staging a crime at the H&J gun store. The cop was armed, the clerk was armed, many of the customers were armed. When it was all over, crime scene investigators counted no fewer than 47 expended cartridges from 7 different weapons. And there was only one casualty. And you know who it was? The guy who thought it would be a good idea to rob a firearms dealer. The headlines are loaded with death by gun. All of these stories are tragic, and yet many are also laced with straight-up stupidity. Like the headline about the guy in Guthrie, Oklahoma, who died from a ricochet after the firing of a .22 rifle. This guy pulled out his rifle, pointed it at a rock, fired the projectile. The bullet ricocheted off the stone and hit his buddy in the head. The reason he fired the gun was that the shooter was trying to kill a bug. Glendale, California, there was a guy named Robert. Robert was explaining, or perhaps mansplaining, gun safety to his wife. He was showing the little woman how these things worked, and where the bullets went, and how guns were actually nothing to be afraid of when they aren't loaded. And to prove this, he pointed his .45 pistol at his head and pulled the trigger. But the gun was loaded. And how about another California man, an avid hunter, a guy named Herman? He got into a nasty argument with his girlfriend. And this was a scary dude because in the heat of the argument, he went in, he grabbed his shotgun, he went out to her car, and he attempted to use the butt of the shotgun to smash her car windshield. The butt of the gun pointed toward the glass. The dangerous end pointed where? At his own chest. And that was the end of that argument. Here is a dangerous weapon story that doesn't involve any guns, as reported by the Associated Press. It was a late day in September of 1996 when a couple, Paul and Bonnie Stiller, were cruising down the road. Now, the report didn't say which of them was driving, but both had been drinking. They were, as they say, lit, okay? And they had with them in this moving vehicle a quarter stick of dynamite. Why did they have dynamite? I have no idea. Police would later discover that this couple had 2 more quarter sticks of dynamite back at the house. But on this fateful September night, these 2 inebriated travelers weaving around the road decided it would be awesome if they were to light the fuse of the dynamite and throw it out the window at speed. Unfortunately, neither of them had checked to make sure that someone had rolled down the window. Oh, and somehow both survived. They were injured. I mean, it was serious, but they both lived. And I think a Darwin Award, or at least an honorary mention for the attempt, I think it is still in order here. And let's continue on the theme of explosives. The American 4th of July holiday is fast approaching, Independence Day. And this is a day when a few people reflect and give gratitude for the fact that they live in a free country, which means they haven't read a single headline over the past 4 months. Forgive me, I started talking politics. My bad. I'm going to get back to the point, okay? 4th of July, Independence Day, where we see a lot of flags and we hear a lot of superior bloviations about American greatness. And this holiday is defined by barbecues and the setting off of fireworks. And every year, you and I prepare ourselves for the reality that at least a few eager freedomers will be enjoying the last moments for which they will have all 10 fingers. The 4th of July is an occasion which is known for its constant safety violations. All you have to do is just walk up any street where people are shooting off fireworks. Just look around casually. You will find somebody who is violating all safety protocols and doing something purposefully stupid. And I honestly think this may be a commentary or revelation of what people are like. Do you want to know if somebody's intelligent and wise, and if they use temperance and wisdom and maturity and empathy and operate in a way where they want to make everyone safer and happier? You can often tell this by watching how they handle black cats and bottle rockets, etc. And there are so many basics that people just ignore. Don't stick your face over the top of the rocket when you light the fuse. The Roman candles are designed to be stuck into the ground and pointed up or away. Do not hold them in your hands. Don't put extra gunpowder in the giant paper cannon. Don't put your mortar inside PVC pipes, which turns the plastic into dangerous shrapnel. Don't throw bottle rockets at all your drunk friends. Just don't. This is basic. And this is a conversation that would have benefited Devin Staples of Maine. Despite the protests from his many friends on the 4th of July, Devin thought, wouldn't it be fun to grab a big reusable mortar tube, load up the projectile shell, set the entire thing on the top of my head, and have my brother light the fuse? That's what he thought. Did he realize at the time that shell and mortar fireworks caused the highest number of injuries? 40% of all fireworks injuries come from shells and mortars, responsible for more than 85% of all fireworks-related emergency room visits, which is why shell and mortars are banned in several states. And when they are not used properly or when they malfunction, the consequences can be fatal. Devin Staples placed that tube containing the artillery shell right on the top of his head, and when the shell misfired and exploded on site, it slightly boosts the statistic about fireworks injuries. Did you know that young men, and Devin was 22, young men are most likely to get hurt or killed when the fire hits the firework? Coming up, I'm going to take you back in time to the 16th century. This man's tale is so known, so revered, that he is honored all of these centuries later. I'm going to have that and a whole lot more as we do Darwin Awards. Hang on. You know, sometimes I am asked what my favorite part of what I do is. Like, what gives you the most joy, as if you can distill it down to one thing, and that's not true for me. I love so much about what I do. I'm an activist. I'm a crusader. I want to go out and change the world. And I'm thinking you may be the same way, right? We want to get out and just get into it and try to engage the culture and improve the world. And I hope that doesn't sound too lofty, but I think let's go out and do what we can. That feeds me in a great way. But I'll tell you, I love being a storyteller. I feel like the world needs more storytellers. So even though we're doing kind of a dark subject today, you know, exploring the insanity of humanity or people who may, I don't know, be examples of devolution, you know, there's a joy in being able to tell stories on the broadcast instead of going down the bullet points of all the awfulness that has happened in the daily news. We're telling stories. We're doing Darwin Awards this week. Remember, back in 2019, when Elon Musk unveiled the Tesla Cybertruck, big deal, right? He had the big public event, all the fanfare, and they drove the Cybertruck out. And then Elon had the lead of his design team, a guy named Franz von Holzhausen, come out and test the Cybertruck's armor glass. So they gave this guy a steel ball, big heavy ball, and they said, okay, I want you to throw the ball against the window and show everybody that it's shatterproof. And we've all seen the video. He threw the big heavy metal ball and the Cybertruck window shattered. And then red-faced Elon Musk would later explain the window had been previously compromised because earlier somebody had also tested it with a sledgehammer, and that caused a little dink in the material. It normally wouldn't shatter. Now, I'm going to let you argue about whether or not that story is a true story. But the window story that I'm telling here involves a Toronto lawyer, a guy named Gary Hoy. And he worked in an office building that was so solidly constructed that he would boast about it. This thing is so solid. He would even give tours to law students, and he would talk about the windows, the unbreakable nature of these floor-to-ceiling glass windows. You want to see how tough they are, how sturdy they are, how unbreakable they are. And this guy, Gary Hoy, would point himself at the window, take a running start, smash his body against it, and bounce right off. The students would ooh and ah, and he would smile. I told you, this building is really well made. But as a structural engineer named Bob Greer would later tell news crews at the scene, I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass window and withstand it. And the reason for that news story is what you have already guessed. Gary Hoy's demonstration of window integrity only had to fail once. One time to result in his 24-story plummet to the street below. So the next time you see a floor-to-ceiling window and you don't want to get too close to it, it's okay. If you don't want to lean on the glass or test the fates, totally understandable and probably prudent, lest you find yourself the victim of an unlucky break. Here is a golden oldie from the 16th century, and you might have seen this story featured in the Cabinet of Curiosities, the story of an Austrian man named Hans Steininger. He became famous for having the world's longest beard at that time, estimated to be about 59 inches. Imagine having a beard almost 5 feet long. Of course, navigating your day with a 5-foot beard would be extremely impractical, and so Hans Steininger would keep the beard rolled up in a leather pouch, or he would just jam it into a coat pocket to keep it out of the way. It was a lot easier to walk and eat and do whatever. Now, he was the mayor of Braunau am Inn on the Austrian-German border. And these hundreds of years later, there's a large stone relief of Steininger on the side of St. Stephen's Church, a remembrance of this popular man who became a kind of folk legend. It was the 28th of September, 1567. A massive fire broke out in this town. There was widespread panic. Hans rushed out to help. And yet, as he tried to get outside, he tumbled down the stairs. He struck his head. He broke his neck and died right there. He stumbled because he had tripped. Guess what he tripped on? Yes, poor Hans at that time had not had his beard tucked away and stuffed in a pouch or jammed into his pocket. It was flowing freely, 5 feet of hair trailing the floor under his feet as he tried to navigate the stairs. Now, I'm not inclined to poke fun at this guy. He didn't die of stupidity. In fact, he was in a frantic rush to help people. So, no Darwin Award for Hans Steininger. Only honor for Hans Steininger. In fact, if you want to pay homage or just learn more about this man, right now a local museum has on display under glass the 450-year-old beard, the actual beard that tripped poor Hans down the stairwell. It is laid out end to end like a long, thin carpet. calling back to that tragic event in September of 1567, one of the worst bad hair days in all of human history. Here's an example that qualifies as an outstanding misapplication of judgment. Or it's like the old saying, wisdom has been chasing you, but you have always been faster. There was a guy named Michael. I will omit his last name in this example, but he was a 58-year-old man living in Texas, and he was an alcoholic. Now, alcoholism is a serious subject, but this particular story warrants mention for a reason that you will hear in just a moment. Michael was apparently only happy, or maybe he was masking unhappiness, with the bottle. He was always drunk, and one night he threw himself one hell of a party. He imbibed two 1.5-liter bottles of sherry. Now, the typical alcohol content of sherry ranges from 15 to 22%. So more than 100 fluid ounces of this stuff poured into his body, resulting in a physical shutdown and a toxicology report that his blood alcohol level was 0.47%. That is 5 times the legal limit for driving in Texas. How in the world did this guy get to 0.47? Well, you drink a bit differently when alcohol absorbs into your system, not from the mouth, but from the other end. When you consume 3 liters of sherry through your rectum. Michael had a throat irritation. It made it painful to drink with his mouth, so he got himself drunk with alcohol enemas. He would just jam those bottles into his rectal cavity. Did he stand on his head, or did he position himself a certain way? I have logistical questions. Alcohol apparently absorbs more quickly through the capillary beds of the rectum, something that is apparently already known in frat houses across the country. But I wonder how many of those party animals realize the dangers and the irony when they put those bottles down for a bottoms up. It was summer in Holland. Employees at a Dutch company had been working so very, very hard, and they wanted a break. And it would be good for office morale. And so these employees got away from business as usual by taking a bus tour. It was a sunny August day, and on that bus there were open-air windows in the roof of the vehicle. So as the bus cruised along, with the breeze in their hair and smiles on their faces, 2 boisterous workers popped their heads up above roof level to feel the wind rushing upon their skin. If only they had kept their eyes open, they might have seen the oncoming viaduct. Okay, I'm going to take a little more time and do some more commentary with this next one, because it does lean heavily into our wheelhouse as we talk about the effect of religious belief on our behaviors and how even the most sincere of people can do real damage, often to themselves. And in this case, I'm talking about the example of John Allen Chau. And you may already be familiar with this one, but for those who are not, John Chau. He was born in Alabama in 1991, raised up in a family of Christians, attended Oral Roberts University. That's about 20 minutes from my house. He got a Bachelor of Science from ORU. Now, a Bachelor of Science from Oral Roberts University is kind of problematic. That's a whole other conversation. But this guy, inspired by Jesus Christ, wanted to fulfill the Great Commission, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to all nations. And apparently this included places where there were hostile tribes, natives with deadly weapons who weren't used to outsiders coming in and encroaching and even molesting their way of life. No, they didn't want any of this. Well, John Chau decided he was going to conquer the fears of the natives. He went to a training camp in Kansas City. It was called All Nations, and I am not making this up. This training camp was like a boot camp for people who were going to spread the gospel in hostile tribal lands, and they would do situationals. So missionary staff members would pretend to be hostile natives. They even had fake spears that they would wave, and they'd shout and carry on. And they would go through scenarios. How do you deal with this? How do you handle that? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you talk them down so that you can eventually talk to them about Christ? This was John Chau in 2017. And in 2019, he considered himself finally ready. He was going to North Sentinel Island, one of the Andaman Islands, which is a protected area of India. He prepared himself by getting vaccinated for travel. He underwent medical and linguistic training, and he paid off some fishermen to get to the islands. And the reason he had to pay them off is because it was illegal for outsiders to go to the island and bother these tribes. He was warned, this is dangerous. These people are going to mess you up. You do not want to go and try to do missions work here at North Sentinel Island. But John Chau would not be deterred. He said in his diary, Lord, is this Satan's last stronghold where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name? The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Don't retrieve my body. So obviously, John Chau realized that his life was on the line. November 15th, 2019, he made his first attempt to visit the island in a fishing boat. He was about 500 meters from the shore, carrying his waterproof Bible. The hostile natives drove him back. Later on, he would try again. He said the islanders reacted to him with amusement and bewilderment and then eventual hostility. Oh, he tried to sing worship songs about Jesus, and he spoke to them as best he could in their native language, or what he thought was their native language. If he couldn't find the words, he would parrot back to them the sounds that they were saying to him, and when he did so, they would jeer and mock and point and laugh at him. He later guessed that it was because they were saying native cuss words. He tried to give them gifts. He tried to feed them food. He did everything that he knew to do. And yet, a boy in the tribe at one point shot a metal-headed arrow that pierced the Bible in his hand right in front of his chest. So on that third attempt, he went away, but he was not going to give up. His final visit, November 17th, Chau paid the fishermen to bring him again to this illegal island and then abandon him. He said, I'm committed, so don't wait for me, I'm going in. And it was during that fourth visit that John Chau finally, ultimately paid with his life. How presumptuous of this brainwashed young man to show up at an island and essentially declare that the tribespeople of North Sentinel Island were living incorrectly, but he had brought the good news of how to live correctly, how to do it right. He was saying, you're broken, I have brought the fix. You are diseased, I have brought the cure. And this tribe, not knowing what he really represented or who might be behind him, what threat he might pose, they responded with lethal force. This tribe of between 50 and 150 people unleashed a barrage of arrows at John Allen Chau, killing him and leaving his body right there on the beach. By the way, 7 of the fishermen who illegally transported John to the island, they were arrested. The inhabitants of the island itself have always resisted outside contact. The little that is known about them comes from photographs that have been taken from the air, and even in those pictures you can see the tribe members rushing toward the aircraft, the helicopters, etc., with bows and arrows. John Allen Chau. Had he not been indoctrinated with this idea, this tragic idea, that he was to go and preach the gospel to everybody, everywhere, including in the most remote parts of the planet, perhaps he might be alive today. Out of compassion, I won't give him a Darwin Awards, but I do think his story is a teachable moment for everybody else. Poaching. The illegal hunting or killing of wildlife, often for sport, and sometimes for the acquisition of things that can be sold unlawfully, things like horns, tusks, meat, etc. In the 2019 case of a would-be poacher in South Africa, the trophy in question was the tusk of a rhino. And so this armed man snuck into a national park with literal sights on killing a rhino and cutting off the tusk. Stories like these are made even more pathetic with the understanding that some rhinos have been hunted to near extinction. But on occasion, the universe comes through in the name of equilibrium, justice, or maybe just desserts. As this poacher hunted his rhino, he was seen and then stampeded by an elephant, and after that, lions showed up and feasted upon his body. Now, this had happened just 1 year before with another group of poachers who snuck onto the Sibuya Game Reserve in South Africa. They also had their sights on rhino horns. And on a morning in July 2018, around 4:30 a.m., the owner of the reserve heard a terrible commotion, mostly the sounds of lions roaring as they attacked prey. The following day would reveal pieces and only pieces of those poachers. NPR reported the 1997 story of a Russian poacher. He shot and wounded a tiger, but he didn't kill it. The tiger roared and ran off, and this man was not able to catch the animal and finish the job, so he hiked slowly back to his cabin, where the tiger had already followed his scent and was waiting there for him. The last sight this poacher ever saw was the eye and perhaps the teeth of the tiger he had tried to kill. He was a guru and supposed health healer. His name was Mr. Lim Ba of Kuala Sanglang, a small coastal village in northern Malaysia. Mr. Lim Ba's customers and community called him by a nickname. He was known as Black Dog. And for more than a decade, Lim Ba had been performing a ritual on himself, which he claimed purified and fortified his body and spirit. It was also kind of a cool trick. He would steam himself. And on one October day in 2017, at the age of 68, the Black Dog once again prepared himself for ritual steaming. Not in a steam room or even placing his head or body over a cauldron of boiling water. This man used a gigantic stainless steel wok. He took off the lid. He hopped into the container, and alongside him were placed food items that would also be steamed. There was rice, sweet corn, vegetarian buns. I am not kidding. So Lim Ba was there inside the wok. He sat in the lotus position as the lid was sealed above him, and then a fire was lit beneath the wok. You and I can only imagine the shouting and the banging that soon rattled that container as this magician and healer frantically flailed in boiling steam. Those outside quickly grabbed the lid and removed it, and they found inside Lim was there, but he was inert, and big surprise, his body was badly burned. Perhaps it's a small mercy that he had not died from the burns themselves, but from a heart attack. A horrible way to go, but really, come on, if you're going to climb into a cooking pot over an open flame while placed next to various food items, wouldn't you already know that your goose was probably going to be cooked? This story is a warning to anybody who is driving or riding a vehicle that's being towed by another vehicle. If you have to get towed, do it slowly, do it carefully, and do it legally. And this advice might have saved Cody Horn, who decided to have himself towed behind a car on California's State Highway 4. That highway had no hard concrete median, only the double yellow line which separated opposing traffic. The vehicle he was in ramped up to speed behind the towed car before it became unwieldy. The wheel eventually popped out of his hands, and before Cody realized what was happening, his vehicle flung itself across that double yellow line directly into the path of an oncoming Ford truck. 28-year-old Cody Horn did not survive. And perhaps I should mention that he was connected to the pull car not via a rope or towing cable. He was connected to that vehicle with a garden hose. And Cody himself was not in a car. He was being dragged behind another vehicle at speed on California State Highway 4 while driving a golf cart. You and I always hear about what a dangerous place Australia can be. I loved Australia. I would love to go back to Australia, but I would not mess with the wildlife, and this would have been good advice for Sean Cole, a 26-year-old man who had been standing on the shore of the crocodile-infested Mary River. He was there as part of a birthday party, and he looked to the other side, to the shore on the other side, and he said, I'll bet I could swim that 90-yard distance. Sean did not make it to the other side because, as we already know, it is a crocodile-infested river. The Mary River Wilderness Retreat actually has warnings and advisories everywhere, and they say do not go within 15 feet of the water's edge because there are crocs. Hell, if I was told there were crocodiles in a water source, screw 15 feet. I'm not even in the same zip code. You know what I mean? These crocs are fast. They just pop out of nowhere. I've seen the movies, I've seen the movies. More Darwin Awards to come, and I'm going to include some examples of close calls where the people survived. And I'll bet we all have a story where we were this close, like this close to buying the farm. And yeah, we got really lucky. I'm going to get into some of those. We're going to have some fun coming up next. Okay, before I get into the final round of stories and cause us all to worry a little bit about our collective future as a species, I want to do a little brain science. Let's be an adult in the room and let's figure out what might be going on. Is it always dumb people doing dumb stuff? And you and I know the answer. Smart people can also be guilty of doing stupid things. There was an article that posted by Professor Heather Butler in Scientific American called "Why Do Smart People Do Foolish Things?" And the article says, we all probably know someone who is intelligent but does surprisingly stupid things. My family delights in pointing out times when I make really dumb mistakes. What does it mean to be smart or intelligent? Our everyday use of the term is meant to describe someone who is knowledgeable and makes wise decisions. But this definition is at odds with how intelligence is traditionally measured. The most widely known measure of intelligence is the intelligence quotient, more commonly known as the IQ test, which includes visuospatial puzzles, math problems, pattern recognition, vocabulary questions, and visual searches. The advantages of being intelligent are undeniable. Intelligent people are more likely to get better grades and go further in school. They are more likely to be successful at work. And they are less likely to get into trouble. For example, commit crimes as adolescents. Given all the advantages of intelligence, though, you might be surprised to learn that it does not predict other life outcomes such as well-being. You might imagine that doing well in school or at work might lead to greater life satisfaction, but several large-scale studies have failed to find evidence that IQ impacts life satisfaction or longevity. University of Waterloo psychologist Igor Grossman, by the way, Igor Grossman is a great professor name. Grossman and his colleagues argue that most intelligence tests fail to capture real-world decision-making and our ability to interact well with others. This is, in other words, perhaps why smart people do dumb things. The ability to think critically, on the other hand, has been associated with wellness and longevity. Though often confused with intelligence, critical thinking is not intelligence. Critical thinking is a collection of cognitive skills that allow us to think rationally in a goal-oriented fashion and a disposition to use those skills when appropriate. Critical thinkers are amiable skeptics. They are flexible thinkers who require evidence to support their beliefs and recognize fallacious attempts to persuade them. Critical thinking means overcoming all kinds of cognitive biases. For instance, hindsight bias or confirmation bias. Critical thinking predicts a wide range of life events. In a series of studies conducted in the U.S. and abroad, my colleagues and I have found that critical thinkers experience fewer bad things in life. We ask people to complete an inventory of life events and take a critical thinking assessment. The critical thinking assessment features 5 components of critical thinking skills, including verbal reasoning, argument analysis, hypothesis testing, probability and uncertainty, decision-making, and problem-solving. The inventory of negative life events captures different domains of life, such as academic. For example, I forgot about an exam. Health. I contracted a sexually transmitted infection because I didn't wear a condom. Legal. I was arrested for driving under the influence. Interpersonal. I cheated on my romantic partner who I had been with for more than a year. Financial. I have over $5,000 of credit card debt, and so on. Repeatedly, we found that critical thinkers experience fewer negative life events. This is an important finding because there's plenty of evidence that critical thinking can be taught and improved. Is it better to be a critical thinker or to be intelligent? My latest research pitted critical thinking and intelligence against each other to see which was associated with fewer negative life events. People who were strong on either intelligence or critical thinking experienced fewer negative events, but critical thinkers did better. Intelligence and improving intelligence are hot topics that receive a lot of attention. It is time for critical thinking to receive a little more of that attention. Keith E. Stanovich wrote an entire book in 2009 about what intelligence tests miss. Reasoning and rationality more closely resemble what we mean when we say a person is smart rather than spatial skills and math ability. Furthermore, improving intelligence is difficult. Intelligence is largely determined by genetics. Critical thinking, though, can improve with training, and the benefits have been shown to persist over time. Anyone can improve their critical thinking skills. Doing so, we can say with certainty, is a smart thing to do. Maybe that relates to this idea that some people are book smart, but not necessarily street smart. But again, we get into smart. Does it mean intelligence? Or have people simply not been using critical thinking skills? I am sorry. If you are standing on the train tracks as the train approaches, you have not been taught or are not using critical thinking skills. And as we get into our final few stories, let's do some honorable mentions. People who had really close calls, but somehow survived. The thumbnail of this broadcast shows a guy and he's taking a selfie with a moving train approaching behind him. It's just a funny image, made me laugh, but it was actually inspired by a true story which was reported in June of last year. 3 women in Uberaba, Brazil were bicycling and they cycled up to a railroad track in advance of an oncoming train. And they thought, wouldn't this make a great selfie? So they got off their bikes and they walked up to the tracks and they kind of leaned in and readied themselves and put their phones up and framed everything. And the train conductor was blasting his horn the whole time. You are too close. It didn't matter. They wanted to get the selfie. One of those 3 women, her head might as well have had a bullseye on it. She got clipped by the locomotive, her body blasted to the ground like she'd been hit by a meteor. Now, do we call it lucky that she never took off her bike helmet, never lost consciousness, and survived with just a broken rib and a gash on her leg? And on the selfie front, back in 2019, there was a woman who jumped the fence at the Phoenix Zoo because she wanted to take a selfie with a jaguar. Somehow she got the shot and she got out of the pen alive. There was a guy named Paul Saunders of Alaska. He saw a grizzly bear fishing for salmon in the river. Yeah, there's a selfie of that, and yes, he is still alive. And there's an entire culture, like whole articles of warnings about this specific type of danger. People wanting to take selfies, and so they hang off of radio towers and they stand on perilous edges of the Grand Canyon or whatever, because wouldn't it be a great photo? And then they die. This has become a chronic problem in the cell phone era. Back in 2016, there were 2 guys. They were walking in sunny Encinitas, California, just walking, and then they jumped a fence and walked some more until suddenly both men walked off of a 100-foot cliff. They got banged up but survived. They had to be rescued by the fire department. Why did they not see the cliff? Because as they had been walking, they were looking at their phones, playing Pokemon Go. April 2019, Modesto, California. There was a highway driver who ran out of gas, and so he grabbed a random plastic jug and he walked to the closest gas station. The plan, of course, was to fill up the jug with a gallon or 2, go back and get the car going so he could fill up the rest of the way. But while he was there with that plastic jug at the pump, he realized there was a pesky valve that kept the fuel from going into the container. And so he decided he would reshape the neck of the bottle by melting it into the shape of a funnel. And yes, to melt it, he used a cigarette lighter. at a gas station. Yes, there was fire and chaos and screaming, and he received some burns on his body. His shoes melted, but this unintended burning man still walks and drives among us today. Have you heard the story of the homemade rocket bike sled? This was reported in the Twin Cities Pioneer Press. A Minnesota man constructed a vehicle out of 2 skis, a modified bicycle frame, and a motorcycle exhaust pipe. This thing was fueled by something called heat, H-E-E-T. Now, heat is an alcohol-based gasoline drying agent. You might see it used as camping fuel for lanterns and stoves, etc. And it dries gasoline up to keep it from freezing in cold temperatures. And so this keen inventor grabbed his invention and he added the fuel, and then he hoisted his homemade rocket bike sled to the starting point, which was on top of his roof. What happened next can only be described as a spectacular failure. He was discovered splayed out on his snowy driveway. His body was banged up, and he was cursing the mangled bike sled lying next to him. Lucky for him, because this guy should have been out cold. That story reminds me of the legendary account of the JATO rocket car. Remember that one? The story about back in 1996, a guy mounting a JATO rocket engine onto a 1966 Chevy Impala. So he mounted the rockets to the roof, according to the story, and then he fired him up and blasted himself into the side of a cliff at the speed of a fighter jet. Investigators allegedly only found the man's teeth and some fragments of bone. The Mythbusters tested the plausibility of this claim, and while it's a great story, it's bogus. The JATO rocket car is just a legend, something that has been told and told and told over the decades. There is no evidence that a Chevy Impala ever blasted into the side of a cliff. And we'll finish with this odd story out of Logmazero, Karelia. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a village in northwestern Russia. Police received a call from concerned residents who said there was a guy unsafely anchoring his fishing boat. So the authorities went out and interviewed the man. They investigated his boat anchor, which turned out to be a World War II aviation bomb capable of sending shrapnel 500 meters in every direction. Now, the detonator on the bomb was missing, but this fisherman had hammered a metal hook into the bomb casing so he could attach the anchor chain. I don't know about you, but bombs and hammers, these are 2 words you do not want to see anywhere near each other. Fortunately for all involved, nothing ever blew up, and the authorities transported the bomb to safety with the words, "Anchors away." You would know it was a bomb, right? I would know it was a bomb. Bombs look like bombs. What's the story here? Was it that this fisherman didn't think a 70-year-old bomb could detonate? Or maybe he thought he knew bomb mechanics? I don't understand. Was he that clueless? In this often clueless world, I am not optimistic, right? Good decision-making doesn't seem to be a characteristic of our species. Has any of this stuff affected the gene pool? I suspect not. But today's examples have been entertaining stories to tell, and again, you and I go from here back out into a world where people stand for selfies in front of moving trains, and they light fires at gas stations, and they shoot fireworks from the tops of their heads. Oh, it can be a stupidly dangerous world. So be safe out there. and I'll see you later.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.